And our guest speaker will be none other than F. Scott Fitzgerald. And if you like Hemingway, you gotta love F. Scott. They were partners in crime, most certainly. So, F. Scott Fitzgerald is considered one of the greatest writers of the 20th century, and he coined the very famous term, the Jazz Age, by the way, to represent the 1920s. If you're not aware of it, he's the dude who came up with that term. And through his novels and those short stories, the most famous of which, I think we all know, The Great Gatsby, he not only documented the 1920s, but he also helped to literally create them. And he said many things about the 1920s, but he said this too. The restlessness approached hysteria. The parties were bigger. The pace was faster. The shows were broader. The buildings were higher. The morals were looser. And the liquor was cheaper. Most of my friends drank too much. The more they were in tune to the times, the more they drank. So you would not know from that quote that in the 1920s in the United States of America, booze was actually illegal. That period of history is called Prohibition. Prohibition is the 18th Amendment of the United States Constitution. Hey, Savannah. Say hello to Savannah, everybody.
Hello.
Prohibition is the 18th Amendment of the United States Constitution. It's ratified on January 16, 1919, to be enacted exactly 1 year later on January 16, 1920. It makes it illegal to distill, distribute, and sell alcohol. Oddly enough, it does not make it illegal to drink it or to buy it. There were loopholes. Like, you could make your own house-made wine. You couldn't sell it, but you could make it and drink it. Another one was you could, this gentleman, coming through, sir. Please. You could, any booze you had on January 16, 1920, you could drink legally. When it was all gone, you were out of luck. The Yale Club in Manhattan, knowing this, stockpiles enough booze in 1 year from 1919 to 1920 for all their members for 14 years. 14 years, which is very prophetic, by the way, because Prohibition ends up lasting just under 14 years when it's rescinded by the 21st Amendment of the United States Constitution in 1933. Franklin Delano Roosevelt, President, old FDR himself, with the 21st Amendment. Now, you're welcome to hang here with us, but I don't want to hold you up. We're going to bring a little history here, okay? So you got to keep in mind that Prohibition was not a law, it was an amendment to our Constitution. So the federal laws that were created to enforce Prohibition became known as the Volstead Act. And to give you a hint of how we approach Prohibition here in New Orleans, is a local gossip columnist living in New Orleans at the time, a woman named Natalie Scott, called New Orleans Cocktails, New Orleans Volsteads. Which tells you, we don't care if it's illegal. We're going to drink. And I think maybe the best quote I have to show you how we approach Prohibition by a woman named Elizabeth Anderson. Now you don't know, you might know. Do you know Sherwood Anderson? Because you're a Hemingway and a Fitzgerald. Sherwood Anderson was not famous today, but back in the 1920s he was world famous. In the 1920s, he moved into the French court. He was a world-famous author. And by the way, he helped Faulkner become Faulkner and Hemingway. And if you want a little story about that later, I can tell you that. But if he should be famous just for that alone. But today he was world famous. So his wife said, we all seem to feel Prohibition was a personal affront and that we had a moral duty to undermine it. And those of us that did undermine it, i.e. drank against the 18th Amendment, became known as scofflaws. There was a word created for people who drank, scoffing at the law, and it's in the dictionary to this day. Look up scoff. So, the moral of the story all is you can legislate morality, but you can never successfully legislate morality. You can't tell me I can't have a drink. I find that in my own soul if I wanted to. We're witnessing the end of the prohibition of marijuana in this country as I speak to you. Another one is prostitution. You may agree with prostitution or you may disagree with prostitution, but just because you make it legal does not mean it's ever going to stop happening. You can legislate morality, but never successfully. So legal bars called speakeasies erupt all over the United States of America, and this was Antoine's speakeasy. Now you got into it was a secret door, now bricked up, hidden in the woman's restroom. So who was behind that but Roy Alcindor, third generation owner? He said, U.S. federal marshals never had the balls to walk to a woman's restroom to find a speakeasy. And apparently he's correct, because Rick, the present owner, told me personally that this place was never busted in the history of Prohibition. Now, you come through that door, there's sawdust on the floor, there's a bar in the space somewhere with your Natalie dressed bartender behind, and he looked at you and said, what'll it be? And he always gave you a drink in a coffee cup, so it looked like it. If you left the speakeasy, it looked like you were drinking coffee. So, in honor of that history, this room is known as the Mystery Room because it was hidden during Prohibition. It was a mystery. So out of the 14 dining rooms in Antoine's, this one is called to this day the Mystery Room.